times we have the work of Dr. William Davis, who wrote a book called Wheat Belly. And if you haven't seen that or been familiar with his information, I highly recommend that you check it out. Because what he discovered was that there is a protein in wheat called gliadin, Gliadin. And maybe this was just something that accidentally happened, or maybe it was intentional. You know which one I think. But the point is that gliadin changes the way that your body works. And what it does is it mimics the thyroid receptors, T1, T2, T3, and T4. As you learn, if you study things like chronic fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr, that kind of stuff, which I did, you can have these very serious issues developing in the body that are caused ultimately by, many people believe, to be wheat consumption. So this protein gliadin actually goes into your thyroid and is taken in place of T1, T2, T3, T4. So most people don't really understand this, but if your thyroid isn't getting those hormones, you will not have energy. You'll be bored, you'll be listless, you'll be depressed, you won't feel good at all, pretty much. And this leads to the so-called chronic fatigue syndrome. Well, you know, there's a pretty easy solution for that. Stop eating wheat, and then you stop eating gliadin, which means it stops replacing the thyroid hormones. But it goes even farther than that. It goes even farther than that because there's so many reasons why you don't want to have grain. And I really don't. My diet now consists of meat, vegetables, fruit, very, very little grain. In fact, I think part of what damaged me on this trip to LA is I was eating lots of white rice. I kept getting sushi takeout, and so I had sashimi, and then I'd have sushi rolls that were made with white rice. And actually, this is so funny, but just before, I have been so constipated. I mean, just before, I've probably spent 45 minutes trying to get this latest one that's on deck out of me, and I just can't do it. I'm just sitting there just freaking going crazy. Well, that's because I ate a bunch of this rice, you know, and so I'm not used to doing that. Now, what this cosmetologist told me was, she mentioned stopping all eating of grain is the main thing that I needed to do to heal the circles under my eyes. Now, it turns out that it was a combination of that, hot baths, and this Rolfing or massage, therapeutic massage, but they all kind of are interrelated. So let's talk about this one by one. It's not just that wheat has gliadin, and it's not just that the gliadin is something that replaces the thyroid hormones, and then when your thyroid takes up gliadin, you're not getting any energy. It's not filling the responsibilities that it's supposed to fulfill. So it's a big problem. Another thing that happens when you eat grain, and this is very specific to the dry, hard stuff like chips, bread, breakfast cereal. If you eat any of that kind of stuff, it stays hard. It doesn't really hydrate when it gets into your body. This is a very, very important point. Then it goes into your gut, and your gut lining consists of one layer of cells. That's it. Believe it or not, the lining of your small intestine, it's not 2 cells thick, it's not 3 cells thick, it's 1 cell layer thick. That's it. And then, as you go further into this research, what you find out is that the only thing that's protecting that one layer of cells, and remember, just to try to think about it, it's only one layer of cells, and you might have these hard chips, like let's say you ate corn chips, let's say you had Doritos, right? There's all these edges, right? When you're chewing on Doritos, they turn into all these little tiny sharp pieces. Well, guess what? You're throwing that into your gut, and what it does is it scrapes off the mucosal lining that's inside your colon and your small intestine. Now, why does that matter? If you don't have that mucus, then you're now directly exposing the actual single layer of cells that your small intestine is made out of to these food particles. There's no mucus in the way. Now, that is very, very, very bad. Why is that so bad? Well, there's a couple different reasons. First of all, there is this compound called zonulin, okay, Z-O-N-U-L-I-N, and that is a compound that holds together the cells in that single layer of membrane. I was originally actually going to sell this information in a course, but I'm just doing it for free because, like, I really think everybody needs to know this. And you could build a really big wellness program around this and help people. In fact, the woman I was staying with had just gotten off of all grain, because if you keep on going this way, you can have very serious health problems, which she was. She'd lost her ability to see for a while. Her eyes started swelling up. So she was on a diet that was basically just red meat and eggs and butter and water. And I mean, there wasn't a whole lot else in the house besides that. And that was part of the problem, is I ended up running out of food. Because I lost my phone and all these other crazy things happened. But I want to talk to you quite a bit about how to heal yourself, because nobody's going to tell you this. I want to tell you this. I'm not going to sell it to you. It's free. Here it is. I also promised this in some of my other courses, and I kind of touched on it before, but not as much as I'm doing right now. I know it's a big ask. I know it's really hard to give up grain. It's almost impossible. People don't want to do it. There's so many things that are made with wheat. You just don't want to give that up, and I get that. But if you do give it up, the results are absolutely phenomenal in terms of what's going to happen to your health. I mean, look at how much nicer my face looks, honestly, than it did before. I had very dark circles under my eyes. I'd cover it with makeup, but you still could see. I mean, it wasn't like I was really hiding anything. And if I took a picture when I didn't have makeup on, I looked like I had, I don't know, some kind of degenerative condition, some kind of disease or something. It didn't look good. So again, in my case, a lot of it was that my whole right leg was all jammed up and blood flow isn't even going through those muscles. It's essentially atrophied tissue because of this catastrophic injury that I had on my snow saucer. So let's go back to the fact that there's the zonulin that holds these various bounds together between cells in the single layer of cell lining that's in your intestines. The only thing protecting that cell layer is mucus. So if you eat stuff that's sharp, if you eat stuff that's dry and hard and made out of this wheat, then guess what happens? The wheat and the other types of food particles, it won't just be wheat, they begin irritating the cell wall, because that cell wall is not built to be exposed to food. It's built to be covered by mucus. This really will save your life. I mean, the information I'm telling you right now could actually save your life, and it could drastically, drastically improve your health on anything that you're thinking about. So what happens is the food becomes irritation, because now those cell linings are not being covered up by mucus. So when you have this food that's got, like, you know, spicy food, or again, grain, any type of grain, it starts to actually irritate and create this redness, this red irritation in the zonulin bonds between the cells. And this is where things get to be terrible, folks, because the zonulin breaks down and openings appear between the cells in your gut lining. Now, what does that mean? That means that now you have undigested food particles that are going directly into your gut. Well, I'm sorry, undigested food particles going directly into your bloodstream. The food enters into your bloodstream without being digested. So if you look at a typical SAD, standard American diet person, SAD, standard American diet, SAD, right? If you look at a typical standard American diet, they've got hardly any gut lining left. They don't have that mucus. There's all this irritation. There's these large streaks of red irritation inside. And as the food hits that, it's going directly in your bloodstream. Now what happens? Now that the foodborne particles are in your bloodstream, bloodborne food particles in your bloodstream, in some cases, they can actually go through the blood-brain barrier. So this is what I'm fighting against. I got a really bad cough, sore throat, all kinds of stuff. So I got to be careful about how loud I talk. But hey, if I want to do an hour, I'm already halfway done. And I'm saving your life. This is information that will actually save your life. So, wow. When I started to learn this, it's like, okay, wait a minute. What happens once the undigested food gets into your bloodstream? Well, when you get this thing starting to happen, they rot in your bloodstream. It's not like it stays fresh. So you have toxic particles in your blood, and they will eventually break down the blood-brain barrier and get into your brain, creating fungus. And in fact, anyway, when you look at how to heal yourself, it turns out that stopping eating grain will save your life. It'll save your life from all sorts of chronic degenerative conditions. And I do believe there's a whole lot of research that was done into this mechanism. And that's why it's so hard to learn about this. And that's why typically you have to go to somebody who's in the know, like a naturopathic doctor. You're not going to get this from allopathic doctors. Nobody's going to talk about, you know, food particles in your bloodstream. Nobody's going to talk about permeable gut lining. Nobody's going to talk about fungus in the brain and this systemic candida yeast situation that you can end up getting. Like, for example, if you have like itchy pain on the corners of your mouth, that's systemic yeast. That's one of the ways you can tell. Another way you can tell is that your ear canals start to itch. So if you have either of those conditions, then you absolutely must stop eating grain. That I would say right off the bat. You got these little, that always hurts. Nope. Same thing with the ear canals. If your ear canals are always itching, that means you have a systemic infection. And almost everybody does, because the food that we eat is designed to do this. So this greatly reduces your lifespan, because now you have toxic pathogenic particles that build up in your various organs, including the brain, including the thyroid, endocrine system, you name it. So you really don't want to have to be stuck with this condition if there's any way you can avoid it. And the only way you can avoid it is to not eat grain. So I really do agree with Pete Peterson. He was telling me that in 1996 on a Christian TBN radio show called Tower of Power, in 1996, that 6 different whistleblowers came forward from a major agricultural giant called Archer Daniels Midland. And they testified on the show, and I've said this before, nobody's been able to find the episode yet. I think we probably can, and I'd love to. It would take some research. But anyway, they came forward as whistleblowers. They probably all died afterwards, honestly. But what they said was that they were tasked with weaponizing the human food supply. And that they specifically were looking at ways to take wheat and turn it into something that was a killer. So when you combine that testimony in 1996 with Dr. William Davis's discoveries about gliadin, and the idea that your thyroid starts taking this stuff up because it mimics T1, T2, T3, and T4, yeah, that starts to look like it might have been intentional. And that was Pete's contention, was that it was. In the early 1970s, the DS got this idea, hey, we need to lower the numbers, we need the Earth to shake off its flea problem. As Uncle Jack would say, mate, we got to have the Earth shake off its fleas. That would make me upset when he would say stuff like that. It's like, dude, you're talking about human lives. You can't analogize people to insects like this. It doesn't make any sense. Or it does if you're an evil psychopath, I guess. So there's food out there all the time that you really don't want to have. Non-organic food, for example, has all this glyphosate in it and all these things that are really, really bad for you. So there's a documentary, as I talked about, called Secret Ingredients, and you can go rent that, pay for it, watch it. And in Secret Ingredients, you have a family who is otherwise very healthy. They're eating conventional produce. They're jogging. They're doing marathon running, and they're all like dying. They're all just very, very sick. The dog is sick. The kids are sick. Everybody's really sick. They only did one thing different. They stopped eating conventional produce and they went to organic produce. So yes, it costs more. Yes, it's harder to get. Yes, you have less selection. There might be a little organic section in the grocery store, and maybe you only get like, I don't know, chard and broccoli and certain types of fruit, and then everything else is conventional. Well, don't eat the conventional. In the movie Secret Ingredients, what they reveal is that when this family stopped eating the conventional produce and went organic, all of their health problems went away. It's a very good idea to stop living in denial and understand that there are very easily achieved weapons out there that you can be ingesting and not even realize it. They've deployed them into the field. They've done this on purpose because they want fewer people. So there's a very nasty thing having to do with wheat and grains in general, and so I don't really eat any grain at all. And as a result, I used to have, I mean, I don't want to really admit this, but I used to have acne on my back. It wasn't bad. I'd get it mostly up here on my shoulders. I'd get it kind of on my neck sometimes. But when I stopped doing this, when I stopped eating grain, pretty much all the acne went away. I don't have any acne at all now. It's really amazing. And again, the really amazing result was getting rid of the dark circles. It was interesting when I was doing shoots with Gaia and I had a makeup lady, Suzanne, that we would go to lunch, and after lunch, she would have to put more makeup under my eyes because the dark circles would get darker after I ate food. And this, again, was proof positive that my gut lining was permeable, and as soon as I would eat food, I would get these new particles that would show up in my blood. And typically, one of the common things you hear about what is dark circles, they say that it has to do with capillaries. There's a lot of very, very thin blood vessels under your eyes right here. And if those blood vessels get damaged by, for example, foodborne particles, then they can become leaky. And there's holes in the capillaries, and those holes are big enough for what? For red blood cells to come out. And once you start leaking red blood cells into this cavity under your eye, it creates pigmentation, it creates darkness. So you actually want to nourish your health. You want to nourish the bloodstream so that you don't have particles in your blood, so that you don't create injuries in these capillaries where, you know, they've been trying to heal, but then all of a sudden they get hit with more particles, they break open again, and now you have more red blood cells dumping into this ocular cavity. Well, in order to not have your capillaries break down, in order to have them not leak these red blood cells, you need to have clean blood. You don't want to have this stuff in your blood. So again, one of the common treatments is there are certain types of enzymes that you take in between meals, and they will get into your bloodstream directly, and they will actually attack and digest these particles in your blood. So that's one of the things that the naturopath will usually recommend for you. But the hard one really is just getting over the fact that you can't have anything that breaks down into little particles. You don't want anything that could irritate, because remember, the main goal that you have is to not have that mucus lining get scrubbed off. Once your mucus lining is scrubbed off, there's going to be food particles in your blood. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's so interrelated with all different types. Every type of disease you can imagine is somehow correlated with this, because this creates systemic conditions that lead to the outcropping of disease of a variety of different types. If you want to know what I eat, I typically will either have chicken for breakfast with sauteed onions, and I reheat the chicken that I'd already heated up before. I just did that this morning. Or I'll have eggs and maybe breakfast sausage, but I always make onions. And so this is another thing.